Welcome to Black Family and Love Stories.
Jordan Aiken was 34 years old, and 2 weeks from the wedding, he had spent 3 years building toward. He had designed buildings from the ground up with nothing but a pencil and a legal pad. He had rebuilt his entire career after losing everything once before. He was not a man who missed details, but somehow he had missed this one. The night of his rehearsal dinner, with the flowers arranged and the toasts already written, Camille's younger sister pulled him outside, looked him dead in the eyes, and said 4 words he never saw coming. "I can't let you marry her." What she told him next shocked everyone. And what Jordan did with that information would shock them even more. Camille stood 20 feet away, laughing with their families, holding a glass of champagne, completely convinced she had won. She had no idea that the most dangerous version of Jordan Aiken had just been born. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The crack in the east wall was barely visible. Jordan saw it anyway. He crouched down, pressed 2 fingers against the concrete, and traced the line from the floor joint up toward the window frame. Hairline thin, maybe 8 inches long. To anyone else on the site, it was nothing. To Jordan, it was a question that needed an answer before anything else moved forward. "That's cosmetic, right?" the client asked from behind him. His name was Gerald Sumner, commercial developer, decent instincts, the habit of hoping problems were smaller than they were. "Might be." Jordan stood, pulled a pen from his chest pocket, and circled the crack on the blueprint with a clean, precise mark. Or, it might be telling us something about the load distribution on the west beam. Either way, we don't pour the next floor until we know which one. Gerald nodded slowly, the way clients did when they didn't fully understand, but trusted the man explaining it. That was Jordan Aiken's way. Quiet authority. Never loud, never hurried. He wore his hard hat pushed slightly back. His blueprints rolled under his left arm like a second spine. At 34, he had the kind of still confidence that came not from ease, but from having been knocked flat before and deciding, methodically, to build himself back up. He'd started Aiken Structural Design 7 years ago out of a rented desk in a shared office on South Main. Before that, a bad business partnership at 27 had cost him his first firm, his savings, and a fair amount of his faith in his own judgment. He'd confronted his partner in public, hot, unready, unprepared, and lost everything because he'd led with feeling instead of strategy. That lesson carved itself into him permanently. Now he thought before he moved. Always. The firm was small. 6 employees, 1 office, a reputation that had grown steadily on the strength of work that was simply done right. He didn't take flashy contracts. He took honest ones. His apartment was clean and modest, the kind of space that reflected a man who valued function over impression. Bookshelves full, a good drafting table by the window, a kitchen that actually got used. His phone buzzed in his pocket. "Running errands, but thinking about you. 2 weeks, Mr. Aiken." He read it twice. Felt the same thing he always felt when Camille's name appeared on his screen. A warmth that had settled into something comfortable and deep over 3 years. She was sharp in a way that kept him engaged. Charming in a way that felt genuine, rather than performed. She had a marketing consultant's gift for reading people, and she'd turned that gift fully on him in the beginning. Seen something in him worth pursuing, and pursued it. He typed back, 2 weeks. Don't be late. Then he pocketed the phone and went back to the wall. Gerald was asking something about the timeline. Jordan answered, but a small and quiet part of his mind was somewhere else. Not with the crack in the east wall. With a different kind of hairline fracture, one he'd been tracking for the past few weeks the way he tracked stress in concrete. Carefully, without alarm, but without dismissing it either. 3 Sundays ago, Camille had canceled dinner. "Work ran long. I'm exhausted. Can we do tomorrow?" he hadn't pushed. But when he'd stopped by her apartment the next morning to drop off a folder she'd asked him to hold, the kitchen counter had told a different story. 2 wine glasses, one half drunk, a second one rinsed and turned upside down by the sink. When he mentioned it casually, she said she'd been home alone all evening. I poured a second glass and didn't want it. You know how I do. He did know how she did. He just didn't remember her ever mentioning it before. Then there was the new guardedness. Not dramatic. Nothing you could point to and name. More like the difference between a woman who used to leave her thoughts out in the open and a woman who now edited herself before speaking. In year 1, Camille had talked freely about everything. Now she chose. Deliberate pauses where spontaneity used to live. Jordan noticed these things. He noticed them the way he noticed a beam that sat 2 millimeters off center. Not enough to call a failure. Enough to watch. He thanked Gerald, shook his hand, and left the site at 4:30. The rehearsal dinner venue was a restored building in Midtown. Exposed brick, warm Edison lighting, round tables set with white linen, and simple greenery. Jordan had insisted on something personal over something impressive. Camille had agreed easily, which had felt like proof of something good between them. He walked in and found the room already half full. Troy was at the bar, deep in conversation with one of Jordan's cousins. Aunt Paulette stood near the window in a burgundy dress, holding a glass of sweet tea, watching the room with the calm assessment of a woman who had seen most things twice. And across the space, Camille was luminous. She laughed at something her Aunt Rita said, one hand touching the woman's arm, her smile broad and effortless. She was wearing deep navy, and she looked like a woman who had never doubted a single thing in her life. Jordan watched her for a moment, just a moment. Then he felt it, a gaze from his left, pressing, urgent. He turned. Deja Whitfield stood near the side hallway, clutching her small purse with both hands. Her eyes found his immediately, and what he saw in them had nothing to do with celebration. Her lips moved, slow and deliberate, making sure he understood. "I need to talk to you. Alone." The side patio was small and plain. 4 wrought iron chairs around a low table, a string of lights that someone had wound around the railing, a potted fern that needed water. The noise from inside dulled to a murmur as the door swung shut behind them. Deja stopped at the railing and gripped it with both hands. Jordan could see them trembling from where he stood. He didn't speak. He waited. That was one of the things his mother had taught him without meaning to, that silence, held patiently, was often the kindest thing you could offer a person working up to something hard. Deja turned around. Her eyes were wet, but her jaw was set. "I can't let you marry her." 5 words, clean and direct, like she'd rehearsed them so many times they'd stripped themselves down to bone. Jordan stayed very still. "She's been with someone else," Deja said. "The whole time. The whole engagement, Jordan. A man named Brandon Holt. They were together before you, and they never stopped." She paused, exhaled through her nose like she was trying to keep herself steady. 8 months ago I was at a conference in Nashville. Marketing summit, 2 nights at the Hilton. I saw them in the lobby. She shook her head slowly. Not just running into each other. Together. The kind of together you can't explain away. Jordan's hands were loose at his sides. His face gave nothing. "I called Camille before I even got back to my room. She picked up on the second ring." Deja's voice cracked once, then steadied. "She cried. I mean, she really cried. Told me it was a mistake, that it was complicated, that it had been fading out for months. She begged me not to say anything. Said she loved you and she didn't want to blow up your life over something that was already ending." She looked at the fern, then back at Jordan. "I believed her. I know how that sounds, but I believed her. She's my sister. And she was crying, and she said it was over." "When did you find out it wasn't?" Jordan asked. His voice was even, careful. the voice he used when he was gathering information and couldn't afford to miss any of it. 2 weeks ago. Deja pressed her lips together. A friend of mine saw them at a restaurant in East Memphis. Private table, back of the room. She didn't know who he was. She just thought Camille looked cozy with some man and sent me a picture to ask if I knew. A short, broken exhale. I knew. She had been carrying it for 2 weeks. Jordan did the math without meaning to. 2 weeks. Deja had been sitting across from Camille at engagement party brunches and fabric sample viewings and all the machinery of a wedding in motion, holding this in her chest like a splinter she couldn't reach. I kept thinking I'd find the right time, Deja said, or that maybe it wasn't what it looked like, or that maybe it wasn't my place. She shook her head hard. But tonight I watched you walk in looking at her like— Her voice broke for real this time. Like she hung the whole room up, and I just couldn't. The patio light caught the tears on her cheeks. She didn't wipe them. Jordan let 1 second pass, then 2. Does she know you're telling me this? Deja shook her head. He nodded once, slowly. He breathed in through his nose, the way he did on job sites when something significant had been confirmed, and the next move required thought rather than reaction. Okay, he said. That was all. He crossed to where she stood and put one hand briefly on her shoulder. Not a long gesture, not a dramatic one, just present, solid. Go back inside, he said quietly. Get yourself a drink. Find your Aunt Rita and ask her something about the centerpieces. Act like this conversation didn't happen. Deja blinked. Jordan, I'll handle it. He looked at her directly. You did the right thing. I mean that. Now I need you to act completely normal for the rest of the night. She nodded, wiped her face with the back of her wrist, took a long breath, and then she straightened, and the shaking in her hands slowed, and she pulled the door open and went inside. Jordan stood alone on the patio. He counted. 1, 2, 3, all the way to 90. He looked out past the railing at the parking lot, at the flat, dark Memphis sky above the low buildings across the street. He let his hands hang. He let himself feel the full weight of what Deja had just placed in front of him, the shape of it, the scope of it, the way it reordered everything he thought he knew. Then he straightened his jacket. He pulled open the door. He walked back into the warm light and the low music and the laughter. He found Camille at their table, glowing. He sat down beside her. She turned to him and smiled, open, easy, beautiful, and reached for his hand. He let her take it. He smiled back, and the smile was perfect, warm, completely convincing. Because Jordan Aiken did not lead with feeling anymore. He had work to do first. The rehearsal dinner ended at 11:30. Jordan shook hands, hugged necks, laughed at the right moments, and said all the right things. He walked Camille to her car and kissed her temple and watched her drive away. Then he walked to his own car, sat down, closed the door, and did not move for a full minute. The parking lot was empty. The venue's lights clicked off one row at a time. He didn't cry. He had learned, a long time ago, that tears were for after. Tears were for when the work was done, and the walls were up, and there was finally space to fall apart quietly, where no one could see. Right now, there was no space for that. Right now, there was only the problem in front of him and what it was going to cost him if he moved wrong. He reached into the back seat and found the legal pad he kept there for site notes. He clicked his pen. He drove to his firm. The building was dark when he pulled into the lot. A 2-story brick building on a corner in Midtown, the name on the glass in simple sans serif letters. Aiken Structural. He had the key in his pocket. He did not go inside. He sat in the parked car with the dome light off and the legal pad on his knee, and the city quiet around him. He started writing. Not feelings. Facts. What I know. He wrote it at the top of the first column. What I suspect. What I need to confirm. Under the first column, he wrote Deja's account in clean, factual language. Brandon Holt. Ongoing. Pre-engagement. Nashville. 8 months ago. East Memphis restaurant. 2 weeks ago. Photo exists with a third-party witness. Under the second column, he wrote slower. Slower because these were the things that had been living in the back of his mind for weeks, without him letting himself look at them directly. The wine glass, the cancelled dinner, the guardedness that had appeared sometime around month 4 of the engagement and never fully left. He paused, tapped the pen against his knee. Then he wrote, the property. The joint property, a duplex in Binghamton, had been Camille's idea. 6 months ago, offered as a gesture of partnership. Jordan had agreed because at the time it seemed like exactly that. Now he stared at the word and thought about what it actually represented. An asset tied to both their names, a legal thread she could pull. He wrote, joint accounts discussion. Not yet merged. Hold. He wrote, client relationship. Who has Camille been in contact with through the firm? He underlined it twice. He wrote, Brandon Holt. What does he do? He sat back, looked at what he'd built on the page. 3 columns, 12 lines. It wasn't much yet, but it was the beginning of a map, and Jordan Aiken did not move without a map. He thought about Marcus Webb. That was the business partner's name. Marcus Webb, who Jordan had trusted at 27 with everything he had built up to that point, and who had moved money out of their shared accounts over 18 months, quietly, a few $1,000s at a time, until there was almost nothing left. When Jordan found out, he did what he felt. He confronted Marcus in front of a client, loudly. He said everything he was feeling in real time, and none of it was strategic, and all of it was caught on someone's phone and shared around. He got the satisfaction of saying his piece. He lost the client. He lost 2 more after that. He lost the lease on his office space because Marcus had been the co-signer, and the landlord didn't want the drama. He lost 18 months of rebuild time because he had led with his chest instead of his head. He swore he would never do that again. He picked up his phone. 2:07 a.m. He found Fitz in his contacts and pressed call. It rang twice. Jordan. Fitz's voice was alert. Not groggy. Alert. That was Fitz. The man slept like someone who had agreed to be available and intended to honor that agreement. I need you to pull documents, Jordan said. Everything tied to my name and Camille's. The property, the accounts, anything you have on file. Quietly. Don't flag anything yet. Don't move anything. Just have it in front of you. A brief pause. Not confusion. Consideration. I'll have it ready by 9, Fitz said. I'll explain in the morning. I know you will. A beat. You okay? Jordan looked out the windshield at the dark street. A traffic light cycled through green to yellow to red, with no cars to stop. I'm fine, he said. Get some sleep. He drove home. He set an alarm for 6. He was asleep by 2:30 and awake before the alarm went off, which was the way it always went when his mind had something to hold on to. He showered, made coffee, sat at the kitchen table for a moment with both hands around the mug. Then he picked up his phone and texted Camille. Morning? Hope you slept well. Thinking about you. Her response came in under 2 minutes. A single red heart. He looked at it for a moment. Then he set the phone face down on the table and opened his laptop. Fitz's office was on the 4th floor of a building on Union Avenue, clean and quiet. The kind of space that communicated competence without trying to impress anyone. Jordan had always liked that about it. He arrived at 8:53. Fitz was already at his desk, with a stack of folders and 2 cups of coffee. He slid one across without being asked. Jordan sat down and told him everything. He started with Deja, the patio, what she saw in Nashville and what she saw 2 weeks ago. He told it the same way he'd written it on the legal pad. Clean, factual, no editorializing. Fitz listened without interrupting, which was one of the many reasons Jordan had kept him for 7 years. When Jordan finished, Fitz was quiet for a moment. He picked up his pen. "The property," he said. "That's the exposure. I'd move on first. That's where I'd start, too." Fitz opened the top folder. "The Binghamton duplex, purchased 7 months ago. Both names on the deed. Recorded with Shelby County. Jordan had put in $41,000. Camille had contributed $8,000. The gap had felt insignificant at the time. It did not feel insignificant now. Upper unit is listed as vacant in the original filing," Fitz said, reading. "Camille managing the property as your designated representative. She told me it needed work before we could rent it." Jordan's voice was even. "Electrical. She said she was getting estimates." Fitz looked at him over the folder but didn't say anything. Jordan drank his coffee. "I'm going to drive by this morning." He took the long way, parked half a block down on a side street, and sat for a moment before getting out of the car. The duplex was a narrow brick building, well kept, with a small porch on each unit. The lower unit was legitimately vacant, windows bare, no mailbox activity, a for rent flyer still taped inside the glass that Jordan had approved 6 weeks ago. The upper unit was a different story. The curtains were drawn, but not fully. A thin line of warm light at the edge. On the porch, a pair of women's boots, a ceramic planter with something growing in it, a doormat that hadn't come with the property. At the curb, a blue recycling bin, half full, with a collection sticker from the current week. Someone was living there. Had been living there for a while. Jordan photographed the porch, the boots, the planter, the recycling bin with the date visible on the sticker. He walked back to his car, sat down, and made the call. He found the number for the property management company Camille had used to set up utility billing. He gave his name as the property owner, which was accurate, and told them he was auditing his rental records and needed to confirm the occupancy status of the upper unit at the Binghamton address. The woman on the phone put him on hold for 90 seconds. "Sir, that unit shows active occupancy. Started 14 months ago. Cash payments, $950 per month, received by your authorized representative. Can you confirm the name of the representative on file?" The pause lasted just long enough. Whitfield. Camille Whitfield. Jordan thanked her, hung up, and looked through the windshield at nothing in particular. 14 months. $950 a month. He did the number in his head without needing a calculator. $13,300 minimum. Possibly more, depending on whether she'd raised it. He sat with that for a moment. Then he pulled out his phone and photographed the utility record on his laptop screen, the property deed page Fitz had sent him that morning, and the text thread where Camille had told him, in writing, with a sad face emoji, that the unit was going to need another 2 months before it was ready to list. He filed all of it, dated, sourced, organized. He called Troy from the car. Troy picked up on the first ring, his voice loud the way it always was when he was on a job site. "What's up, little brother? You remember that developer, Brandon Holt? The one who came up at the South Side meeting a few months back?" A pause. The background noise dropped slightly, like Troy had stepped away from something. "Yeah," Troy said, slower now. "Why? Has his name come up with any clients?" Another pause, longer this time. "Jordan," Troy's voice had changed. "Holt's been throwing your name around for at least a year. Like y'all are partners, like he's operating under your umbrella. I heard it from 2 separate guys. Figured you had some kind of arrangement I didn't know about. A beat. You didn't know." It wasn't a question. "No," Jordan said. "I didn't." The line was quiet for a moment. "How bad is it?" Troy asked. "I'm still finding out." He ended the call and sat for another full minute, his hand resting on the steering wheel. 2 things in one morning. The subletting income Camille had been pocketing for over a year, and his professional name used as a sales tool by a man he had never formally spoken to. He called Fitz. "Block the property transfer," he said when Fitz picked up. "Fully. Nothing moves, nothing gets filed, Nothing changes on that deed without my signature on it personally. Done by noon, Fitz said. Jordan pulled out of the parking spot. He called Aunt Paulette that evening after dinner, sitting in his kitchen with the lights low. I need you to stay close this week, he said. Can you come early? She didn't ask why. I'll change my flight tonight, she said. He didn't move right away. The call ended, and the phone sat in his hand, and he just sat. The kitchen was quiet. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere outside, a car passed slowly down the street, its headlights sweeping across the ceiling for a second, and then gone. Jordan set the phone on the table. He had been holding it together since the patio, 40-some hours. He had written on the legal pad and called Fitz and driven by the property and photographed boot prints on a porch that weren't supposed to exist. He had talked to Troy and blocked the deed transfer and eaten dinner with Camille on Tuesday night, laughed at something she said, touched the small of her back when they walked to her car. He had done all of it, every piece, without cracking once. Now he was alone in his kitchen, and there was nothing left to do tonight. And the silence found him. He thought about the ring. He had spent 3 weekends looking for it, not because he needed that much time, but because he wanted to be sure. He remembered standing in the third jewelry store, holding the box under the display light, thinking, she's going to love this. Not as a performance, not as a strategy. He had genuinely, completely believed that. He had been a man standing in a jewelry store, thinking about the expression on the face of the woman he loved, and every single part of that was real. That was the part that hurt the most. Not the money, not the property, not even his name in Brandon Holt's mouth. It was the fact that he had been fully present for all of it. He hadn't held back. He had picked a venue because she mentioned once, offhand, that she loved exposed brick. He had chosen a date that landed before the anniversary of her father's passing because he didn't want that shadow near their wedding day. He had thought about that. He had cared about that. He thought about children. They had talked about it. Not hypothetically, specifically. Names, even. She had said she liked older names, something with weight. He had agreed, and he had meant it. And he had let himself imagine a version of the future that now existed nowhere except his own memory. He sat with that for a while. He didn't try to push it away. His mother used to say it when he was a boy, whenever he tried to swallow something painful too fast. She would put her hand on the back of his neck and say, "Still water doesn't mean shallow water, babe." She meant, just because you're quiet doesn't mean you're empty. Let it move through you. Don't dam it up. He let it move through him now. It moved slow and heavy, like water through old pipe. There was grief in it. Real, clean grief. The kind that comes from loving something completely and watching it turn out to be something else entirely. There was anger underneath that, quiet and structural, not hot and not rushing. And beneath the anger, something harder. Something that had no name, but felt like the moment after you confirm a crack in a foundation and you stop feeling surprised and start thinking about load distribution. Camille had looked at him and seen a platform, a set of relationships she could use, a name she could borrow, a legal structure she could step into and then step out of carrying whatever she could reach. He was a resource to her. He had been a resource the whole time. And she had been very good, genuinely good, at making him feel like he was something more than that. He wiped his face with both hands, stood up from the table. He drove to the all-night coffee shop on Broad Avenue, the one with the bad lighting and the good espresso and the kind of low hum that let a man think without being disturbed. He ordered black coffee and took the table in the back corner. He opened a fresh legal pad, not the one from the car. A new one. Clean page. This list wasn't about what he knew. He already knew enough to end it. This list was about what he still needed to confirm before he moved. Not for himself. He didn't need convincing. But when the moment came, and it was coming, he had already decided that he needed the kind of documentation that left no room for anyone to reframe the story. No room for Camille to cry her way into a different narrative. No room for Brandon Holt to claim he hadn't known whose name he was using. He wrote deliberately, pressing the pen down like each word was a nail. The list had 3 columns: what he had, what he needed, how to get it. He wrote until the coffee was gone. Then he capped the pen, closed the pad, and left. He spent the next day making phone calls. He framed each one the same way. A routine check-in, nothing formal, just wanted to touch base before things got busy with the wedding. 3 clients, men he had known for years, men whose projects had gone through his firm and whose trust had been earned the slow way. He asked each of them how things were going. He listened. He asked follow-up questions. He let the conversations breathe. He was listening for a name. All 3 said the same thing. Not the same words. The words were different, shaped by different men with different ways of talking. But the substance was identical. Each of them had been introduced to Brandon Holt's company through Camille. Each one had assumed, without question, that Jordan had personally sent them. One of them, Marcus Webb, a commercial developer Jordan had worked with for 6 years, had even said thank you to Jordan at a dinner 8 months ago, and Jordan had nodded politely, without understanding what he was being thanked for. Now he understood. He sat in his car after the 3rd call and looked at nothing for a moment. His name had been moving through Brandon Holt's business like currency, spent quietly in rooms Jordan had never been invited into, by a woman who smiled at him every morning and straightened his collar before he left the house. He wrote the names down: Marcus Webb, David Cho, Reginald Ferris. 3 columns, dates, project descriptions, the exact language each man had used to describe how the introduction happened. Then he made one more call, not to a client, but to a mutual contact. A man named Garrett, who ran a commercial real estate meetup downtown and knew everyone in the development space. Jordan framed it simply. He was getting married, trying to clear his desk before the honeymoon, had heard Brandon Holt's name come up in a couple of conversations, and wanted to put a face to the name before things got busy. Could Garrett make a quick introduction? Garrett said sure, he'd set something up. The meeting was at a coffee shop near the convention center. Brandon Holt arrived 2 minutes late and ordered something complicated without looking at the menu, which told Jordan most of what he needed to know before the man sat down. He was good-looking in a comfortable way, well-dressed without being precise about it. The kind of man whose confidence came not from what he had built, but from never having had it seriously tested. He smiled at Jordan with the easy warmth of someone who expected to be liked. "Good to finally connect," Brandon said. "Garrett speaks highly." "Likewise," Jordan said. He kept his voice easy. His hands were loose on the table. They talked for 20 minutes. Development trends. A project overlap that Garrett had vaguely described to get them in the same room. Brandon talked more than Jordan did, which was fine. Jordan was not there to talk. He was there to listen and to watch. And then, somewhere between the 2nd cup of coffee and a question about financing timelines, Brandon mentioned Camille, not as Jordan's fiancée, not with any awareness of what she was to the man sitting across from him. He mentioned her the way a man mentions someone who belongs to his regular life, with ease, with a small private smile at the corner of his mouth, with the particular warmth of someone who has stopped performing casualness and is just being natural. "My girl's been saying for months, I need to get more connected over here," Brandon said. "She's got good instincts." Jordan nodded. "Sounds like it." He did not blink. He did not shift. He let the moment pass the way water passes over stone. Present, noted, gone. Brandon Holt had no idea. He did not connect Jordan's firm, Jordan's name, Jordan's face to the man Camille was 2 weeks from marrying. Either she had kept them carefully compartmentalized, Or he simply hadn't paid close enough attention to the details of her other life to recognize them when they were sitting directly across from him. Jordan suspected it was the second one. He finished his coffee, shook Brandon's hand at the door, thanked him for his time with a calm, measured smile. He walked to his car, started the engine, and pulled smoothly into traffic. That evening, he sat at his kitchen table with his laptop open and his phone beside it. Months ago, 8, maybe 9, Camille had handed him her phone in frustration, some iCloud issue she couldn't sort out, and he had fixed it in about 4 minutes. She had thanked him, kissed him on the cheek, and gone back to watching television. Standard Tuesday night. Neither of them had thought much about it. What she hadn't done was remove him from the account access afterward. He opened the shared iCloud panel and navigated slowly. He was not looking to read everything. He was looking for a specific thread. The number Troy had mentioned, the one the subletter had texted when she needed something handled. He found it in under 3 minutes. A secondary number, not Camille's main line. A second phone or a second SIM, the kind of setup a person uses when they want certain conversations to stay separate. The subletter's text thread was there. 14 months of back and forth about the unit, maintenance questions, payment confirmations, all cash. All routed through a name that wasn't quite Camille's but was close enough to trace. He kept scrolling. The same secondary number appeared in a different thread. Longer, older. The messages were brief and careful, the way messages are when two people have learned to communicate without leaving obvious evidence. But the pattern was unmistakable. The ease was unmistakable. Brandon. Jordan took screenshots of everything. Methodical. Dated. He forwarded the full packet to Fitz with a single line of text. Add this to the file. We're almost complete. He set the phone down and looked at the wall. The affair. The subletting income. The client referrals made under his name without his knowledge. A paper trail now documented, dated, and legally packaged. One piece remained. The same secondary number appeared in a different thread altogether. Brandon's name wasn't in the contact. Just a string of digits, but the conversation made it clear enough. Jordan read 3 exchanges. That was all he needed. He closed the laptop, sat back in his chair, and looked at the ceiling for a long moment. Then he forwarded everything to Fitz and added Brandon Holt's name to the growing file. He arrived at Camille's apartment at 6:30 on Thursday evening, a little ahead of schedule. She had texted him the reservation was at 7. He had his key. He used it. The apartment was warm and smelled like the vanilla candle she kept on the kitchen counter. Music played softly from the Bluetooth speaker in the living room, something low and jazzy, the kind of playlist she put on when she was getting ready. Her heels were by the couch. Her purse was on the entry table. She was in the kitchen, and she was talking. Her voice was low, careful, the way a person's voice gets when they are saying something they have practiced keeping quiet. Jordan stopped in the hallway. He did not move. He did not breathe loud. He stood with his back against the wall just past the entryway, and he listened. I know, Camille said. But you have to be patient. 60 days, 90 at the most. Once we're married, the firm assets become marital property. That's how it works. A pause. Brandon, on the other end. I'm not asking you to wait forever. I'm asking you to wait a minute. Her voice dropped even lower, took on that particular tone she used when she wanted to sound reasonable without being questioned. I'll handle the Jordan situation after the wedding. It'll be clean. There won't be anything to fight about because everything will already be in place. Another pause, shorter this time. Just be patient, please. A small, private laugh. You know, I always come through. Jordan stood in the hallway and heard all of it. He felt something move through him. Not rage, not grief, but something quieter and more final. The last small part of him that had been waiting for a different explanation went still. There was no different explanation. He counted to 5. Then he shifted his weight deliberately, let his keys jingle against his hand, and stepped into the kitchen doorway with the easy expression of a man who had just arrived. Camille turned. Her phone was already face down on the counter. She smiled. Wide, warm, completely practiced. "Hey, you!" She crossed to him and kissed him on the mouth. "You're early. Traffic was lighter than I thought." He smiled back. "You almost ready?" 2 minutes, she said, and disappeared toward the bedroom. Jordan stood in the kitchen and looked at the vanilla candle burning on the counter. 2 minutes. He gave her 2 minutes. Dinner was lovely. The restaurant had low lighting and good wine, and a jazz trio that played softly near the back. Camille was charming and attentive, laughing at the right moments, touching his hand across the table, telling a story about a difficult client that made him smile genuinely. She was very good. He had always known that. But knowing it now felt different, like watching a skilled performance, and finally being able to see the seams. He paid the check. They walked out into the cool evening air. He drove her back to her apartment, walked her to her door, and kissed her on the cheek the way he always did. "Tonight was nice," she said, and she meant it, and somehow that was the hardest part. "It was," he said. He waited until she was inside. Then he walked back to his car, sat down, and drove across town to the hotel where Aunt Paulette was staying. She opened the door in her robe, one look at his face, and stepped back without a word to let him in. The room had a small table near the window with 2 chairs. She put a glass of water in front of him and sat down across from him and folded her hands and waited. He told her everything. From the patio at the rehearsal dinner, Deja's shaking hands, her lowered voice, all the way through the property records, the subletter, the clients, Brandon Holt's easy smile at the coffee shop, and the 45 seconds he had stood in Camille's hallway an hour ago, listening to her plan the end of his life like a business transaction. Aunt Paulette did not interrupt. She did not make sounds of shock or outrage. She simply listened, the way she had always listened, with the full weight of her attention and not one wasted word. When he finished, the room was quiet. She looked at him for a long moment. "What do you need me to do?" she finally asked. The next morning, Camille left for work at 8:15. Jordan arrived at her apartment at 8:45. He let himself in with his key. He moved through the space without hurry. A man who knew exactly where he was going and exactly what he was there to do. Tennessee was a single-party consent state. He had confirmed that with Fitz the night before. He placed the device where it would pick up the kitchen clearly. Then he left, locked the door behind him, and went to his office. By 2 in the afternoon, his phone buzzed with an audio file from the recording. He sat in his car in the parking structure beneath his firm and put in his earbuds and listened. Camille's voice, Brandon's voice, the same conversation, slightly different words, same architecture underneath. 60 days, the firm, after the wedding. He pulled out his earbuds. He called Fitz. "We have everything," he said. "Set the date. I want it done Sunday. Aunt Paulette's house." Aunt Paulette's house smelled like it always did on Sundays, pot roast and cornbread, and the particular warmth of a home that had been well lived in for decades. She had set the long dining table with her good plates, the cream-colored ones with the gold trim she only brought out for occasions that mattered, fresh flowers in the center, real cloth napkins, the kind of table that said, "This is important," without having to announce it. Jordan's cousins Marcus and Denise arrived first, loud and cheerful, debating something about a football game on the drive over. Troy came in behind them, ducked under the doorframe the way he always did, even though the doorframe was tall enough, and immediately found his way to the kitchen to steal cornbread before it hit the table. Aunt Paulette slapped his hand without looking up from the stove. He grinned. Camille's family arrived 15 minutes later. Her mother, Ms. Dolores, came in with a covered dish and a warm smile, pressing Aunt Paulette's hand with both of hers and complimenting the house in that gracious southern way that left no room for awkwardness. Camille's Aunt Rita followed, pearls on, posture perfect, the kind of woman who dressed for every occasion as though she expected to be photographed. And then Deja, quiet at the back of the group, her eyes finding Jordan's the moment she stepped through the door. He gave her one small nod. She looked away and sat down. Camille arrived last. She wore a deep burgundy dress that fit her perfectly and gold earrings that caught the light when she moved her head. She was radiant. She knew it and wore the knowledge lightly, the way beautiful, confident women sometimes do. Not arrogance, just ease. She came through the door and moved through the room like she owned every relationship in it, kissing Mrs. Dolores on the cheek, hugging Aunt Paulette with genuine warmth, laughing at something Marcus said without missing a beat. She found Jordan near the kitchen doorway and crossed to him. "This is so nice," she said softly, squeezing his arm. "Your aunt really went all out." "She did," he said. He smiled. She squeezed his arm again and moved on to greet Troy. Jordan watched her go. He felt nothing but clarity. The first 40 minutes were exactly what they looked like. Good food, easy conversation. Troy told a story about a job site disaster that had everyone at the table laughing before he even got to the punchline. Ms. Dolores and Aunt Paulette discovered they had both grown up in households where the television stayed on during dinner, and they compared notes like old friends. Marcus refilled glasses. Denise complimented Camille's earrings. Camille received the compliment gracefully and asked Denise about her new job. She was performing beautifully. Jordan knew that now, but watching her was like watching a building he had already condemned. The shape was still there, all the familiar lines, and it almost looked solid until you knew what was underneath. He ate his food. He laughed at the right moments. He answered questions directed at him and asked a few of his own. He was calm, the way still water is calm, completely on the surface and very deep underneath. Then Aunt Paulette set down her napkin. "Before we get to dessert," she said, in the particular tone she used when a room needed to come to order, "Jordan has something he'd like to say." Heads turned, glasses lowered. The conversation softened and then stopped. Camille turned to him with a smile, soft, private, the smile of a woman expecting to be honored in front of people she had already charmed. She reached across the table for his hand. He didn't take it. The smile flickered, just for a second. Then her expression settled back into pleasant attentiveness. Jordan stood. He did not clear his throat. He did not look around the room for encouragement. He stood the way he stood on job sites when he had to deliver news about a structure that could not be saved, with the steady composure of a man who had already done the hard work and was now simply reporting the results. "I want to thank everyone for being here," he said. "Both families. That means something to me. It means I only have to do this once." He reached down and placed a manila folder on the table. "Camille has been in a relationship with a man named Brandon Holt for the full 3 years of our engagement." He said it without pause, without editorial, just fact. "I have documentation, phone records, a signed statement from the woman he confirmed it with." He opened the folder, set the first page on the table. "That's the first thing." He turned to the next page, the apartment on Clearview, the one we purchased together last year. "Camille has been subletting the ground unit without my knowledge for 14 months, $950 a month, paid in cash, to a number registered to a secondary phone she's been using." He placed the payment records on the table beside the first sheet. 14 months, $16,000. Here are the records. He let that sit for one breath. 3 of my clients, people I've worked with for years, were referred to Brandon Holt's development company by Camille. Each of them believed I had personally endorsed him. I had not. Here are their signed statements. He set 3 pages on the table. "And here is a letter from my attorney confirming the misrepresentation." The room was very quiet now. The kind of quiet that has weight. Jordan reached into his jacket pocket and took out his phone. "Last Thursday evening," he said, "I arrived early to pick Camille up for dinner. She didn't hear me come in." He pressed play. Camille's voice came through the speaker, small and clear and unmistakable. "I'll handle the Jordan situation after the wedding. It'll be clean. There won't be anything to fight about because everything will already be in place." 30 seconds. He let it finish. Ms. Dolores covered her mouth with both hands. Deja stared at the tablecloth, unmoving, her hands flat on the table in front of her. Aunt Rita turned her face toward the window. The silence held. Camille opened her mouth. Jordan raised one hand, not sharply, not dramatically, simply with the quiet finality of a man closing a door that would not be opened again. The room didn't move. Nobody reached for their glass. Nobody shifted in their seat. The only sound was the faint tick of Aunt Paulette's wall clock, steady and indifferent, counting seconds that felt much longer than they were. Jordan looked at Camille. She was still sitting. Her posture was perfect, because Camille's posture was always perfect. But something behind her eyes had changed. The performance was over. What was left was just a woman calculating her next move, and Jordan could see it as clearly as he could read a blueprint. He let her see that he could see it. "I'm not marrying you," he said. No anger in it, no satisfaction either. He said it the way he would have stated a measurement, simply a fact, plainly delivered. "The property transfer has been legally blocked. My attorney handled that Friday morning. Nothing tied to my name moves without my signature, and no transfer request will receive it." He reached into the folder and slid one last page forward without looking down. "The accounts we discussed merging have been separated as of this morning. That process is complete." Camille's jaw tightened just slightly. She was working very hard to keep her face composed. "Fitz has filed a civil complaint for the subletting income," Jordan continued. $16,000. You have 30 days from the date of filing to return it before it proceeds to the next stage. That paperwork was served this morning as well." Ms. Dolores made a small, broken sound. She didn't look at her daughter. She looked at the flowers in the center of the table like she was asking them a question. "Every client who was referred to Brandon Holt's company through my firm has already been personally contacted by me. They know what happened. They know I did not endorse him, and that my name was used without my knowledge or consent. Those relationships are mine. They were never hers to give." He paused. "That's done." He closed the folder. "I want you to understand something," he said. His voice was even and quiet. "I don't wish you any harm. I don't wish you anything at all. Not bad luck, not hard times, not a single difficult morning." He picked up his jacket from the back of his chair. "Nothing. That's what I'm leaving you with. Nothing from me, in any direction." He looked at her for one more second. She looked back with an expression he had never seen on her face before. Not shame, not exactly, but something close to the recognition that the room she had been moving through so confidently had just closed around her. He didn't wait for what came next. He pushed his chair in neatly, the way his mother had taught him, and walked out of the dining room. Troy was on his feet before Jordan reached the hallway. He said nothing. He just fell into step beside his brother the way he always had, his presence as steady and uncomplicated as a load-bearing wall. The front door opened, closed. Aunt Paulette sat at the head of the table and folded her hands, and waited. 72 hours later, Jordan sat at his desk at the firm and reviewed the complaint one final time before Fitz filed it. It was thorough. It was documented. It was exactly the kind of paperwork that left no room for interpretation. Brandon Holt's development company had used Jordan's name, his firm, his reputation, his decade of cultivated professional relationships, as an implied endorsement in client pitches and investor materials. 3 signed statements confirmed it. Email records confirmed it. A presentation deck that Brandon had circulated to investors referenced Jordan's firm by name as a partnering organization. Jordan had never been asked. Jordan had never agreed. That was a licensing matter. Fitz filed it on a Tuesday morning, quiet and precise, the way Fitz did everything. That same week, Jordan attended the monthly meeting of the Memphis Black Developers Coalition. He had been a member for 6 years, usually quiet in the back of the room. This time, he sat at the table and laid out his documentation in plain language. He didn't editorialize. He didn't ask for anything dramatic. He told the membership what had happened, his name used without consent, his professional relationships treated as a commodity that wasn't Brandon's to trade, and he let the facts speak at their natural volume. He did not ask them to expel Brandon. He simply ensured they knew. Word moved through the coalition the way it always moved through professional circles. Not loudly, not all at once. The way water moves through a foundation, slowly, completely, and with permanent effect. By Thursday, 2 of Brandon's active development deals had paused. Investors were requesting clarification on the referral claims Brandon had been including in his pitch materials. The calls came in without warning, politely worded and precise, asking about the nature of the partnership with Jordan Aiken's firm. There was no partnership. Brandon had built part of his business on a foundation that didn't exist, and the structure was showing it now. 2 of his development partners requested buyout terms within the following week. Not because anyone had told them to, because men who build things understand what it means when the ground underneath a business relationship turns out to be borrowed. Brandon attempted to reach Jordan through a mutual contact. The message came back requesting a sit-down, an opportunity to clear the air, as the message put it. Jordan read it once. He forwarded it to Fitz without a note. Fitz's written response arrived at Brandon's attorney's office the following morning in a single sentence. There is no conversation. There is only a licensing review. Mr. Holt should speak to his attorney. The Memphis morning came in low and warm, the kind of late spring air that felt like a promise the city was actually trying to keep. Jordan stood at the edge of the site and looked out at what was going to be something. Right now, it was dirt and survey stakes and a chain-link fence with a project sign zip-tied to it. Aiken Design and Structural. Mixed-use development. Phase 1. But Jordan could see past all of that. He always could. In his mind, the building was already standing, the ground-floor storefronts, the affordable residential units above, the community meeting space on the second floor that had been the part of the proposal he fought hardest to keep when the city reviewers had suggested trimming the budget. He hadn't trimmed it. His mother had grown up 4 blocks from this lot. She had walked this street with groceries and tired feet and 4 kids, and a belief that things could be better for the people who lived here if someone cared enough to build something real instead of something profitable. Jordan cared enough. He pulled on his hard hat and stepped through the gate. The project manager jogged over with a revised soil report and a question about the eastern foundation depth, and Jordan slid into the work the way he always did, fully, without ceremony, every part of his mind engaged. He crouched down and examined the staking. He asked 3 questions. He made 2 corrections. The crew moved. This was what he was made for. The civil complaint had closed quietly. Camille's mother, Ms. Dolores, practical and ashamed in equal measure, had made sure of that. The wire transfer arrived on day 28 of the 30-day window. $16,000, returned without a single word of negotiation. Fitz sent Jordan a 1-line email, confirmed received. File closed. Jordan had read it at his desk, nodded once, and gone back to his drawings. Brandon's licensing review was still proceeding. These things moved slowly by design, and Jordan was not in a hurry. The outcome had already been written in the only place that mattered, the professional landscape of Memphis, where word traveled quietly and stuck permanently. The infrastructure of Brandon's business, built in large part on Jordan's name and Jordan's relationships, had been removed. What was left was a smaller operation with shakier footing and a reputation that now came with questions attached. Jordan had not made a single phone call to make that happen. He had simply told the truth to the right people and let the consequences find their own level. Camille had called once. A voicemail, late on a Thursday night. Tearful at first, then sharp, then pleading. The 3 stages arriving in the same 2-minute message like weather moving through. She called him vindictive. She said he had destroyed her life over a mistake. She said he had never really loved her, if he could do this. Jordan had listened to the whole thing standing at his kitchen counter with a glass of water in his hand. Then he had deleted it and finished his water and gone to bed. Deja called the morning the wire transfer cleared. She apologized again for the 8 months, for the silence, for the part she had played in letting it go on as long as it did. Jordan let her finish. "You don't owe me anything," he said, "except the truth you eventually gave me, and you gave me that." She was quiet for a moment. "You doing okay?" "Yeah," he said, and meant it. Sunday dinners at Aunt Paulette's had become the fixed point of his week. He brought groceries. She cooked more than 2 people could ever eat. They sat at her kitchen table after and talked about everything and nothing, and sometimes just sat, which was its own kind of conversation. Troy came by the site twice a week now. He'd taken on the concrete subcontract for Phase 1, and the 2 of them moved through the workday with an ease that had deepened into something solid and comfortable. Brothers who had been through something hard together and come out of it knowing exactly where the other one stood. Fitz had talked Jordan into golf. Jordan was terrible at it. He showed up on Saturday mornings in slightly wrong shoes and hit the ball in directions that made Fitz wince, and he didn't care even a little. It was 90 minutes of fresh air and laughter, and nothing that needed to be built or protected or documented. He had met Petra through a mutual friend at a fundraiser in February. She was a landscape architect with a dry wit and a habit of asking follow-up questions that suggested she had actually listened to the first answer. They'd had coffee twice. She had not asked him where he saw himself in 5 years. She had asked him what building he was most proud of, and then actually wanted to hear the answer. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't avoiding anything either. He was simply moving at the pace of a man who had learned the difference. Late that evening, Jordan sat at his drafting table. The site plans for Phase 1 were spread in front of him, detailed and precise, the kind of drawings that took weeks to get right, and still revealed new things every time you looked. The desk lamp made a small warm circle over the paper. The rest of the office was quiet. He thought about Camille, not with anger. The anger had done its work and burned itself clean. Not with grief either. The grief had been real, and he had felt it fully, and it was done. He thought about her the way he thought about a structure that had failed, not with bitterness, but with the specific attention of a man whose job it is to understand why things collapse. What had he missed? What had he chosen not to see? What had he wanted so badly to be true that he had accepted things at surface level without testing the foundation beneath? He held those questions without punishing himself with them. They were just questions, the kind worth carrying forward. He picked up his pencil. He got back to work. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.